They had to break one of the most complex codes in history. But when they succeeded, nobody knew about it. They were an elite team of mathematicians, scientists, and spies. They worked around the clock in total secrecy, and if they failed, the consequences would be dire. This is the story of the forgotten map behind 7 wonders. Deep in the British countryside, away from prying eyes and ears, lay Bletchley Park. It wasn't much to look at, just a big house with some sheds. But what went on inside those sheds changed the course of history. For here a motley crew of codebreakers, led by the brilliant but eccentric Alan Turing, took on one of the greatest intellectual challenges of all time. As the Second World War raged on, they faced constant frustration, setbacks, and danger. Yet they never gave up. Their mission, to crack the German military code known as Enigma. Can you imagine a world without Google? No Netflix, no Facebook, no Instagram. Well, that's what the world would be like today if these code breakers hadn't done their job. But how did they do it? First, we need to understand the challenge they faced. The Germans used a machine called Enigma to encrypt their communications. It was a bizarre-looking device with a keyboard, a set of rotors, and a plug board. When the operator typed a letter on the keyboard, a tiny electrical signal passed through the plug board. Then it moved onto the rotors, 3 wheels with electrical contacts. As the signal moved through the rotors, it was scrambled according to a complex algorithm. Finally, the signal came out of the machine as an almost random set of letters and numbers. Because the machine had a huge number of possible settings, it seemed virtually impossible to decipher the messages it produced. So how did Turing and his team beat the Enigma machine? It started with a hunch. One day Turing realized that the Germans probably used the same encryption settings each day. So he built a machine called the bomb to test thousands of possible settings at lightning speed. When the bomb found a match, an alarm would sound and the code breakers could read the message. Suddenly, the unbreakable Enigma code could be broken. So how did they break the Enigma code? With the help of a Polish mathematician named Marian Rejewski, who had made some progress breaking the code before the war began, Turing and his team were able to build upon his work. They built a machine that could simulate the Enigma machine. By inputting potential settings, they could see if the machine produced the same cipher text as the Enigma machine. Once they had a match, they knew they had found the right setting for the day's code. Turing and his team also developed a way to break the Enigma code even if it was encrypted with a new key every day. Instead of trying to guess the key, they would simply let the Enigma machine run through its possible settings and then stop it at a certain point. With a bit of math, they could figure out where in the sequence the message appeared, allowing them to read it. But there was one final piece of the puzzle: figuring out which rotors and plugboard settings the Germans were using. This required a lot of trial and error, but eventually the code breakers were able to crack the code. They broke the Enigma code for the first time in 1932, just a year after it had been introduced. The British government kept this a secret for fear that the Germans might change their code. But once they knew they could break the code, there was no turning back. Over the next few years, the code breakers at Bletchley Park worked tirelessly to improve their methods and decrypt more and more German messages. By the end of the war, they had read millions of German messages, including many of the most important ones. But it wasn't easy. The code breakers faced constant frustration and setbacks. The Enigma machine was constantly being updated with new features, making it harder to crack. And the German high command eventually realized that their codes were being broken. That meant the code breakers had to work under constant pressure, knowing that the Germans could change their code at any moment and that all of their hard work could go to waste. Despite these challenges, the code breakers pressed on. They worked in shifts around the clock, and they developed new machines and techniques to keep up with the Germans. They also had to deal with the danger of enemy spies and saboteurs. Some of them even ended up in prison when they were suspected of being spies themselves. But through it all, they never gave up. They knew that the work they were doing was vital to the war effort, and they were determined to succeed. And succeed they did. Their efforts helped the Allies win many important battles, including the Battle of the Hellenic and the D-Day invasion. Historians say that their work may have shortened the war by 2 years, saving millions of lives. But despite their vital contribution to the war effort, the code breakers at Bletchley Park remained unknown to the public for many years. In fact, the work they did at Bletchley Park was so classified that they weren't even allowed to talk about it to their families. Even after the war ended, they were sworn to secrecy, and most of their work remained classified until the 1970s. One reason for the secrecy was that the British government didn't want the Soviets to know that they had broken the Enigma code. If the Soviets had known, they might have taken steps to prevent the British from decrypting their own messages. Another reason was that the British government didn't want to reveal the methods that had been used to break the code. They were afraid that other countries might try to copy them, and they didn't want to give away their secrets. In recent years, however, the work of the code breakers has finally been recognized. They have been given credit for their vital contribution to the war effort, and their story has inspired countless books, documentaries, and films. Turing himself has become a national hero in Britain, and his image even appears on the new 50 pounds note. But what would the world be like today if the code breakers hadn't done their job? Well, for one thing, it's likely that the war would have lasted longer. Without the intelligence gained from breaking the Enigma code, the Allies would have had a much harder time defeating the Germans. This could have led to more casualties and more destruction. Additionally, the Cold War may have been much colder. If the Soviets had known that the British had broken the Enigma code, they might have taken steps to prevent this from happening again. This could have led to a more paranoid and antagonistic relationship between the two countries. Ultimately, it's impossible to say for sure what would have happened if the code breakers hadn't done their job. But it's safe to say that the world would be very different from the one we live in today. When Alan Turing died in 1954, his obituary in the Times of London said that he was one of the few people whose contributions to this field were of major importance, and who was generally known to have done outstanding work. He was known to some of his colleagues for his brilliant but eccentric manner and unorthodox views. He was one of the first computers. Turing's work on breaking the Enigma code was one of the most important achievements of the 20th century. His methods not only helped to win World War II, but also laid the foundation for modern computers. In fact, Turing is often considered to be the father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence. He was a true genius who changed the world. So what can we learn from Turing and his team? Firstly, we can see the importance of perseverance. The code breakers at Bletchley Park faced constant frustration and setbacks, but they never gave up. They knew that their work was important and they were determined to succeed. Secondly, we can see the power of teamwork. The code breakers were able to achieve something that no one else had been able to achieve by working together. They were a diverse group of people with different skills and backgrounds, but they were able to put aside their differences and work together for a common goal. Finally, we can see the importance of recognizing the contributions of others. The code breakers at Bletchley Park were unsung heroes for many years, but thankfully, their work has finally been recognized. We should all strive to recognize the contributions of others and to celebrate their successes. So what do you think? What's the most interesting thing you learned about the code breakers at Bletchley Park? And what do you think we can learn from them? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit subscribe for more untold stories that shape our world. Thank you for watching.